Thank you so much, Dr. Marc Milstein, for coming on Wellness Your Way. I am so excited to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Of course. Well, I'd love for you to start off by just telling the audience a little bit about yourself.
Well, I live in Southern California. Actually, I went to UCLA and studied like molecular biology, biological chemistry, and I was doing research in a lab on actually breast cancer. And what was discovered as a group of scientists was that something that's involved in breast cancer, a certain protein, was also involved in learning and memory. And that really opened up this insight into the things that are happening in one part of the body impact what's happening in the brain, and it's all very much connected. And it was really around the time where our understanding of how the brain works was really just kind of exploding in terms of really good insights into how the brain works in terms of how we sleep and how those insights can help us sleep better. And I really got very interested in this idea of how do we take all this amazing information about how our brain works and how do we use it to make it work better. And so I really focused on that, and recently wrote a book about how to get the best of your brain each day and how to keep it working better down the road. So that's just kind of a little bit about me and my background.
Incredible. Well, it's always amazing to me how our path can be a bit winding, but we settle
Yeah.
on something that feels really important to us. And I think feels important to a lot of people these days. The brain is having a heyday, and aging of the brain and memory and cognition and mood and anxiety and things like that. At least in my practice, I know that the questions about that and the interest about that is increasing. So good on you for choosing this timing and for helping so many people.
Mhm.
It's
Oh, I
awesome.
appreciate that. Yeah, I think there's also we're learning there's so much more in our control about our brain health. And I think that's really empowering and really uplifting. So there's just things we can do. So that's really the big take home message.
Oh, I love that. I love it. I'm all about giving some actionable tips. So I know we'll get to many of those today. I've heard you say, though, to start out, that brain optimization is a key to longevity. And those are some buzzwords that my audience really like. So tell me why you think brain optimization is the key to longevity.
Well, we're living longer in general. And what we want to do, though, is live longer as healthy as possible. So and a key part of that is really having our brain work. And we now know that we shouldn't be losing significant memory or brain function. In the past, people would say, oh, that's part of aging. That's just the way it goes. But really, it's not normal. It shouldn't be happening. Our brain should last as long as our body, if not longer. We have the power, as we talked about a moment ago, in these insights, in ways to keep our brain young. And so what's really interesting is that your brain doesn't have to be your age. Your brain can
Mm.
actually be older or younger than your actual age. And we clearly see by making it younger, you can get the best of it each day, but also protect it years down the road. And we tend to think that, our brain is just working on, solving problems or thinking, but our brain controls everything. It controls our walking and our movement and our balance. And so these are such important parts of longevity on top of just controlling how our organs function. Our brain's doing it all. So we have to keep our brain in tip-top shape, which we can do, to really get the longest, healthiest life possible.
Love that. And so, in the effort of keeping our brain young and healthy and active, I'd love to hear anything about what accelerates aging of the brain. Maybe something surprising that we might not guess would accelerate aging of the brain.
Yeah, there's actually quite a few things. We can talk about some underlying conditions that are surprising, but I'll just tell you one that is very much in our control, which is our sleep.
Mm.
And when we go to bed at night, our brain, amongst many things that it's doing, it's not just taking a break. It's basically squeezing out waste, toxins, and trash when we're asleep, and it's keeping our brain clean. And a clean brain is a youthful brain, because as we get older, that process of getting rid of garbage in the brain gets less effective. And if you think of like a house or an apartment that fills up with garbage or waste, it's hard to find things. It's hard to be productive. Same thing in the brain. And a key part of the aging process for the brain is that we're not cleaning out this waste and this garbage, and it interferes with the brain's ability to function, to remember, to think, to get things done. And so that's something that we really can prioritize and optimize and say, you know what, I'm going to really get a good night's sleep. I'm going to do the things to get a good night's sleep because that's when I clean my brain and I don't want to wake up with a dirty brain or a messy
Yeah.
brain, because if you know that feeling of, you know, you wake up and you didn't get the best night's sleep and you're kind of foggy or fuzzy, at its essence, that's too much of that waste left in the brain that we didn't clear out. So we're concerned about that short-term and even long-term buildup of that waste. So I would say right at the top of the list, among some other things, is just really thinking about, I just need to give myself the best night's sleep possible as often as possible, knowing it's not going to be perfect every night, but something to really prioritize.
I love the word that you just ended on. You used it 3 times throughout that, which is prioritize, because we've talked about sleep here on Wellness Your Way a lot. I know the audience knows some basic things like a consistent bedtime, no blue light, no screens, like help
Yeah.
yourself wind down, optimal sleep environment, all of these kinds of things. It's not necessarily a lack of knowledge. We've talked about magnesium and other things like
Yeah.
that. It's a lack of prioritization in many cases. And I'll
Yeah.
I'll throw myself from a decade ago under the bus. I did not prioritize sleep. I know that was not acting in my best interest. And is it hard? Yeah, it's hard to prioritize sleep, but it's not that hard and it's so worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so true. And something, all the things you mentioned are right on and perfect and great. One thing that has really helped me, and it's rooted
Great.
in some really interesting discoveries, is that we're actually preparing for every night in the morning, for every night's sleep, I should say. And so you have this clock in your brain that counts down to sleep time, and you start the countdown by getting outside into
Mhm.
natural light for about 10 minutes soon after getting up. And I find that for myself, it really helps, is that not just thinking about sleep as something that I'm preparing for, you know, 5 minutes before bed, 10 minutes before bed, an hour before bed, but it's actually, I start my day by saying, this is something I'm going to do. I'm going to get outside, take a quick walk. Not only is that good for a lot of reasons, but it actually is helping me sleep at night. So just something that I found that if I skip it, I pay for it. So
Uh,
just a tip that is can be very impactful.
That's so amazing. I love the tip. Get outside as soon as possible in the morning for 10 minutes. I have 2 questions about that. I have a
Yeah.
perspective, but you're the expert. So I'm asking for my benefit and others. One is, what if you wake up before the sun rises? Do you wait till the
Yeah.
sun rises or do you still get right out? And the second is it still okay if it's not a sunny day?
Yes. So, good news on both of those. One is that it's not really the intensity of how sunny it is. So they've actually done studies that a cloudy day is completely fine.
Right.
It's the wavelength of the light. So don't be afraid of a cloudy day. That will also stimulate the brain clock to start its countdown process. So that's okay. Cloudy days are fine, in terms of helping you sleep. And then if you wake up before the sun comes up, completely fine. As long as you know you're getting enough sleep. Just when the sun does come up out, that's a good time to say, I'm going to go take a quick walk. I'm going to take a break, 10 minutes outside, and then get that process going. Because we now know that that brain clock doesn't just play a role in sleep, it plays a role in mood and metabolism. So getting that process going is really good for multiple aspects of mental and physical health.
Oh, I love that. I do go to bed very early, embarrassingly early, but like by 9 o'clock. And I wake up really early and I love my morning routine, my meditation and all of that. But I intentionally schedule getting outside if it's my workout, if I'm running or walking or something like that, great. But otherwise getting outside for trying to be around the time the sun rises. So thank you for
Oh, good.
sharing
Oh,
that.
good. No,
Now I'm going to
yeah.
pat myself on the back extra and say, I'm helping myself with sleep tonight. So very good.
Okay.
So prioritizing sleep, that's one. What's maybe one other thing that accelerates aging of the brain?
Well, quite a few things, but
Sure.
something is, I'll just say blood pressure. And
Mm,
I'll say that because I just read a study on it yesterday, that blood pressure in our 30s impacts our brain health in our 70s. So it's
wow.
something that is really controllable. And we all, you know, it's not a big surprise to say, oh, blood pressure is important. It is
Yeah.
more of a surprise to say it's so important for your brain. And I think
Yes.
even more of a surprise to say it's impacting your brain 40 years later. So I would say that, you know, we know about blood pressure, but know your number. And the study suggests that keeping it around 110/70 in that range is where we see a lot of protection for brain health. And it brings up just a bigger point, which is when it comes to taking care of the brain, it's not really all about, crossword puzzles and Sudoku. It's really about
Yeah.
things like things like blood pressure and some other things that we can talk about where they don't seem connected, but they are. And the good news is we have really good treatments for these things. So we just want to be on top of these little things that if we kind of stack them together, we can really protect our brain down the road. It's kind of like investing now for your brain health.
Yes.
And a lot of these things also, your blood pressure now also does impact how your brain works that day and later, the next day and that week. But just this idea that things that don't seem connected are, but we have good treatments for them. So we just want to take advantage of them because it's all about how do we lower risk, and how do we try to push odds in our favor for our brain health.
Love that. Another thing that might not seem connected, although my audience is pretty smart about this, so they might have guessed, but
Yeah.
the average person wouldn't have guessed gut health and brain health are connected. I
Yeah.
believe, and I know you believe, they're very connected. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. Yeah, this is a really exciting area, in terms of this really kind of two-way street between what's happening in our brain and how that impacts how we're feeling in our gut, and then what's happening in our gut and how that impacts our brain.
Yes.
And just one of, there's so much to talk about there, but one thing that really I think ties it together is our gut is a source of inflammation. And inflammation, I like to think of it like a fire. And just like a fire releases smoke, inflammation in our gut releases these kind of like these chemicals that get into our bloodstream and they travel up to the brain and they confuse these cells that are up there that their job is to kind of eat up garbage and waste and keep your brain clean and young, like we were talking about. And they confuse these microglia. These are these cells that are just like they're garbage eaters in the brain, and they confuse them into attacking healthy brain cells and damaging healthy brain. So we see that, wait a second, what's happening down in our gut can be sending these signals through inflammation to our brain that's confusing these microglia that are supposed to be doing a really good thing for us, but they make them this mistake when they get the wrong message. And so then we start to realize, wait a second, well, what causes that inflammation? Well, things that we're eating can play a role. And then we realize that we do have much more control over all of this than we thought, in terms of, wait, I can do some things to put out that fire. If I have a fire, in the gut, which is quite common, I can do things so I'm sending more calming, relaxing signals to the brain instead of these like inflammatory signals. So yeah, really interesting area of research about how, again, an area of the body that is very much connected to brain health, and there's things we can do about it.
Amazing. So, what are some of those foods or food categories that would send the wrong message, the inflammatory signals to the microglia?
Yeah.
And then what are some of the anti-inflammatory food categories?
Yeah, diet, and as you know, is it's complicated and it's individualized, but there's some really aspects of it that are just pretty consistent along whatever diet you're on and works for you. These things just are really like cornerstones of brain health, and just building upon these ideas, which are, and I always just quickly sum it up by, I was in the Science Museum in Chicago, and they have a Twinkie that they unwrapped like 15 years ago, and it's sitting there and it looks amazing. It looks like it looks like it would taste like just like it would if you unwrapped it like yesterday, or I should say even like a minute before. And I think that's what
Wow.
we're worried about. The foods
Yeah.
that don't spoil, the additives, the preservatives, the ultra processed. Just thinking about minimizing. If you look at the packaging and you're like, I can't pronounce this stuff. This is a chemistry experiment. This isn't food. That those things, we just want to say like minimize those things because they can cause inflammation. They feed bad bacteria that causes those chemicals to be released into the bloodstream that confuse the microglia in the brain. So a really just, goes a long way as a simple step is just thinking about whole natural foods most of the time and eliminating or minimizing the processed foods most of the time. That step right there just goes a long way. Beyond that, there's a lot people can do, but that's a big bang for your buck, I would say, step.
You are speaking our language here. I love that. And I like the complicated stuff sometimes, but honestly, most people are looking for that complicated stuff and we're missing that one
Yeah.
huge principle, which is if it spoils, it's probably going to be healthier for you than that Twinkie
Right.
that's in the museum in Chicago. I lived in Chicago for a
Yeah.
couple years, and honestly, I'm glad I didn't see that Twinkie because it probably would have made me angry. Oh man.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's
great.
like a
So
miracle of science Yeah, it's a miracle of science, but not a miracle of like health, I'd say.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Let's use our science for something else other than making more
Right.
Twinkie-like products.
Sure.
Let's pivot a little bit to mood and depression and anxiety, which are wreaking havoc on our society today. What tips do you
Yeah.
have to stave off depression and improve our mood?
Well, even just going back to two of the things we talked about, sleep is critically important for mental health. What's happening in our gut impacts our mental health. Those microglia that we talked about that attack, they can attack parts of the brain involved with memory, or they can
Mm,
attack parts of the brain involved with mood. So we know in some cases, not all cases, that depression, anxiety have an inflammatory root to them, and that spreads from parts of the body to the brain. So realizing it's all connected, we keep coming back to that idea, which is good because that means that these things that we can do help with multiple areas. But just when it comes to mental health in general, talking about these things, being open and lessening stigma, realizing it's important to reach out and talk to people about it, being connected, not feeling isolated, and also being aware that our mental health now, today, impacts our risk of dementia down the road. And that's something we didn't know until this year. That if somebody is suffering from depression or anxiety and it's not managed, it significantly increases their risk of dementia down the road. And so that's we really just want to get that word out, not to scare people, but to say that we want to prioritize. Back to
yeah.
that word of prioritizing. We want to prioritize mental health now, because it's a root of memory loss down the road. And so just being aware that prioritizing time to feel connected, to be social, if that's something that helps people, reaching out to professionals to talk about it, and all the other things that are really good for our brain. Exercise is critically important for mental health. We
Yeah.
know that clearly now, and what we're eating plays a role. It's just all these factors together, and then I just keep coming back to this, but reaching out to a professional because these things are serious, and they need professional guidance, especially if they've reached the point where they're disrupting someone's day, or they're getting to the point of really inflicting serious pain in someone's life. We want to just really make sure that that person's being taken care of.
Absolutely agree. Thank you
Yeah.
for that. I wonder if you could describe, you're doing a great job at putting things into understandable terms, but is the mechanism by which the mood issues today lead to dementia in the future, is it that same thing, the inflammatory cytokines and the microglia maybe not being able to clear amyloid plaques, or what's going on? What's the connection?
Yeah, exactly what you said is one mechanism that we believe is happening, absolutely an inflammatory mechanism. If someone is struggling with mental health, oftentimes they're not sleeping well. That's a
Yeah.
common symptom, so that they would be not clearing out that waste and that garbage and that damage. Also, individuals who often are struggling with mental health often aren't getting outside, aren't
Mm,
exercising, aren't being social. So it's a combinational factor. And then just at its essence, when we're in a state of too much cortisol release, due to anxiety states or states with depression. So a little bit of stress or a burst of stress is really good for the brain, but if it's too much too often, that cortisol actually shrinks parts of the brain involved with memory. So the hippocampus is a really powerful memory center. And if we think about it, like if we're in a state of excuse me, if we're in a state of stress where it's like we want to get something done and it's a challenge, and that's all good. That actually causes the hippocampus to grow and get bigger and stronger. But if it's a constant stream of this cortisol too much too often, the memory center shrinks. And it can
yeah.
be a really vicious cycle because individuals, often who are suffering from depression, they're having trouble learning the things or the tools to get out of the depression state. So it's challenging. It's not impossible to overcome, but it's important to be aware that there is this struggle that is rooted in something that's happening in the brain, and that's why step by step, progress is really important, and being aware, having guidance and help to realize this isn't something that can just happen easily. It's absolutely possible, and there's a lot of success there, but it's a process because the
Yeah.
brain is struggling to learn new tools in a depressed state where it needs to learn new tools.
Yes, I love that. I'm very much not meaning to suggest that a 2-minute breathing exercise is going to solve depression or something
Yeah,
like that. But I do think there are little things, if we feel
yeah,
ourselves in that state of high cortisol and we know our brains and our bodies just on overdrive, I do want to believe that there are little things we can do in the day. Do you have any tools like that that you rely upon or suggest?
Yeah, absolutely. So, a big one is, and I agree, it's not just one thing, but it's putting these things together in the right combinations for people and realizing that, it might not be the total solution, but it's a part of the solution.
Yes.
And one that I use and utilize is nature.
Yeah.
Just realizing that how powerful nature is, and realizing that if I can get myself, even to like a backyard, or like a local park for even a few minutes, I really personally feel the difference. And there's a lot of science to back this up, that 10, 15 minutes in nature, stress levels come down. And not looking at my phone, putting my phone,
Yes.
turning it off, because it's so hard not to look at it and not to check it. And I always bring myself back to this study I read in that came out of Japan, where they had people stare at a plant on their desk for 2 to 3 minutes, and their stress levels came down. And so they said, well, is there something we can do that's
Wow.
even better than that? And they said they found that if they like spritz the plant with a little bit of water, which is like taking care of something, a little bit of purpose, a little bit of gardening,
Yes.
that was actually even more effective. So I would say that these little things, dose of nature throughout the day for me is really helpful, and there's a lot of science to back it up. And then even just like if I'm doing work, like glance over to plant for a minute or two, disconnect from all the stress, and just kind of because it's all about being in the present moment. That's really what all this really is. A lot of our stress is like in the past or the future, but in this moment, stress levels tend to drop. So I utilize nature. I see the plant right behind you.
Yes.
That's a,
I have a
yeah,
couple
nice.
back there, and there
Yeah,
are two
yeah, right,
others over there too. I
right, yeah,
I
yeah,
really feel what you're saying too. And I'm not,
yeah,
my husband's the gardener of the family, so I can't claim to be doing anything in our backyard. But I feel, like you said, just going out there, even if it's just for 2 minutes, which is not the full optimal dose, but I just feel like, a little weight off my
yeah,
shoulders. And do any of us have 2 minutes just sitting around? Probably not, but we can make
yeah.
those 2 minutes. Even the busiest of us can
Yeah.
make those 2 minutes. That's great.
Yeah, it's
Thank you
that
for that.
reset. It's the
Yes.
reset that is we get. It's kind of like we in our modern world we get kind of on a hamster wheel, and that's just constant cortisol, and just these little moments of reset are just so important for our brain.
Yes, I agree. Another one that I like, I always find it kind of silly, but maybe that's why it works. I'll just literally lay on the floor, ideally outside on the grass, but
Yeah.
even in my office here, I'll just lay on the floor for like 2 minutes and not touch my phone. And it really feels like, oh, wow, you're definitely not working right now. You're truly like in the relaxation zone. That works a lot for me.
Yeah, yeah. The brain needs those things. It needs like, you know, things that sound silly are really impactful when it comes to
Yeah.
stress management. Like just closing your eyes. So much
Hmm.
information is hitting our brain nowadays that we just become overwhelmed and not are not even aware of it. So just like even closing your eyes for a minute or two and letting your brain catch up is again falls into the category. If that seems silly, but there's science there, and people find it to be very helpful. I find it to be very helpful.
Amazing. So you mentioned crossword puzzles before. I will give you a free pass for dogging on crossword puzzles because I personally happen to love them, but I understand your
Uh-huh.
point. It's not just that's not the only thing we have to do to
Right.
stave off Alzheimer's, dementia, etc. I am wondering though if you have any other non-crossword puzzle tips for increasing our memory.
Yeah, so crossword puzzles are great. It's just not, a few years ago it was like, oh, I'll just do crossword puzzles and I'm good. That I think that's just the message of, but if you're doing them and you're enjoying them, keep doing them because there actually is evidence they're good for you. But it's just we want to think about. I like to think about cross training the brain.
Yes, love it.
So it's like if you go, if you go to the gym and you only work out your arms, after a while that's not going to look right. So
Right.
same thing with the brain. It's like crossword puzzles one day. That's
Yep.
great. And then another day of the week, be like, okay, I want to do something where I have to like learn movement. I'm going to either like dance or Pilates, yoga, a sport, because my brain and balance are so important for brain aging that I want to just do something physical, mental physical is what I would say. So like one day, purely mental is good, like crossword puzzles or learning a new subject, new foreign language, something like that. Next day, a day of the week, something physical that you have to remember things physically, and then the third day is something social. And so we know that being social is actually really important for learning. So like even if you just meet your friend for, coffee or go for a walk with your friend, which is like two in one because you're
Yeah.
moving uh, and you're learning. But when we talk to people, we're learning. And so it's just like thinking about your week is like how you would think of like cardio and strength training and, maybe balance exercises. Same thing with the brain. Just like thinking about during the week, like, oh, I just want to make sure I'm, prioritizing a little bit of a mix of these activities, because those are the things we really see work for memory, not necessarily like a brain game or an app, but like
Yeah.
mixing it up throughout the week with some of these like fun social
Yes.
learning exercises that can combine brain and body.
I love that. I'm a major introvert who also really likes people. I mean, I set up my business
Right.
talking to people through the day,
Yeah.
but I wonder if there are differences in benefits. I tend to believe I still get benefits for my brain by being social. Are there differences, though,
Yeah.
for people across the spectrum of introversion and extroversion?
Yeah. And so it's about finding that comfort zone, that point where you're not pushing yourself to the point where like I'm not happy because I'm either
Yeah,
seeing too many or too little people. And it's
right.
not the number of people. That's the other thing we see. There's these really interesting studies that show that you don't have to have like tons of interactions or tons of friends. It's the quality
Mm,
of the interactions. So it's the people
interesting.
who make you feel good, the people who make you feel like they're supportive, they're there for you in the good and the bad. They make you feel better in the good times and better in the bad times. And the people that give you a sense of purpose or a sense of like even a maybe there's a relationship where you feel like you're a mentor or somebody's mentoring you or you're there for support back and forth. Those types of quality relationships are what's really beneficial, not like having tons of of friends that are just sort of maybe not not the quality friendships that can happen. So yeah, for introverts, extroverts, it's just taking a moment and being like, what is the interactions that really make me feel good, and then prioritizing those.
Amazing. Well, so far you've done such an incredible job of taking the science and making it actionable for us. So I know the audience is going to want to run out and grab your book, and we'll give the title and all the information about the book in just a moment. But I wonder if I could challenge you to just give us one more tip of all the things in your book, all the things you've already
Yeah.
said. What's one thing that we haven't touched on yet?
Something that's really simple. Oh, can I give two? I'll give two.
Sure, you
Uh,
could give
one
two.
is one is tonight, don't just brush your teeth, but floss them. And the reason that
Okay.
is that the inflammation, gingivitis, raises the risk of memory loss, raises the risk of dementia and Alzheimer's. Another example of inflammation in one part of the body that we would think, oh, that's not a big deal, is important. So we can really take some control. And tonight, don't just brush, floss too, because you're lessening inflammation in the gums that could spread to the brain and can wreak havoc down the road. And then, so that's something really simple. But another thing is, as simple as can be, is get 30 minutes of walking in a day. 30 minutes of walking a day lowers the risk of dementia by about 65%. And so,
Wow.
it doesn't have to all be done at the same time. Can be like 5-minute walks, walking around your house, your apartment, parking a little bit farther from the grocery store, getting off the bus or the subway a stop early. All these things count. And we now know there's real science to this, that if you walk, you're really sending these, you're causing a release of factors in your brain called BDNF, which keep your brain cells young and healthy. And so just prioritizing a little bit of walking, a little bit more walking if you're not getting it, or if you are walking, embrace it, because it's really important for your brain health.
I love those two. Thank you. So, your new book is called The Age Proof Brain: New Strategies to Improve Memory, Protect Immunity, and Fight Off Dementia. I am personally, as soon as we get off, I'm going to procure myself a copy, and we'll put a link in the show notes for all of the audience to get their hands on it. Where would you suggest that listeners learn more about the book or you, or anything else you want to share?
Oh, I appreciate that. Well, I have a website, just my name and then DR at the front, drmarcmilstein.com. And then the book is on, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, I guess where they say every books, wherever books are sold.
Yes.
And it's just really a hopeful, science-based, actionable things you can do. We now know you can lower your risk for Alzheimer's and dementia anywhere from 30 to 60% based upon, I like to say, little things that don't have to be major changes that also allow you to feel your best each day. So it's kind of a dual benefit. It's not a boring science book. It's science. There's a lot of science in there, but it's fun, in a way that is really actionable and usable. And doing more on social media too. So at Dr. Marc Milstein on places like Instagram and things like that, trying to get some tips out that way too.
Oh, amazing. We will link to the website and the Instagram and the book, of course, all in the show notes. And wow, if we can lower risk of dementia by 30 to 60%, and you are giving the people the tools to do that, just think about how you're changing the world. So I give you a
Oh,
round of applause, and I thank you so much for sharing your tips with our audience today.
well, thank you. Thank you for all that you're doing, and I appreciate you having me on.
Of course.